Good afternoon. I'm Jane Elkanini, the supervisor of the Town of Mamaroneck. I want to welcome you today to our Tri-Municipal commemoration of the anniversary of the terrorist attacks of 9/11. With me are my colleagues on the town board, Sabrina Fiddleman, Jeff King, Robin Nachinsky, and Anant Nambiar. I also want to call out the superintendent of schools who is here, Charles Sampson. I saw you. Okay. This year marks the 23rd anniversary of the September 11th attacks. Those lost on that date, 23 years ago, will never be there for all the special moments in our life, like weddings, holidays, graduations, and births. They bring us so much joy. Nor will they be there for the everyday moments of life. Sitting around a kitchen table, running out for something needed at the grocery store, picking up someone from school, going out for a drink and dinner with friends, playing a game of pickup hockey. They are forever missing, and we must never forget those from our community whose lives were tragically cut short on that day. Their names will be read later in this program. We must also never forget the first responders from our community have since succumbed to 9/11 related illnesses as a result of their selfless heroism on that day. We will dedicate a new memorial to them later in this ceremony. We've suffered so much loss. We can never make up for that loss, and we can never forget them. Now I would like to call for the color guard. The Reverend Lisa P. Mason for the invocation. Lisa.
God of love, we come together as a community to remember and mourn this horrific and devastating day in our nation 23 years ago. A day of reverberating shock, fear, death, woundedness, endless questions, threads of hope to hear of a loved one who survived, and deep, deep grieving for those who did not. We remember all those days that follow and those yet to come. May our grief work in us so that we may love more deeply, be merciful to one another, and be reconcilers and bearers of peace. We need to be together, both to remember those who died, those who were injured, those who lost loved ones, and to name those who died that day and in the years that have followed as a result of their selfless service and dedication. May God's love sustain us and God's peace soothe our hearts, knowing that with God's help and the strength of being together, our communities can find shared compassion and care for one another this day and always. Amen.
Now I'd like to call Sarah Bauer, Mayor of the Village of Larchmont, for some remarks.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank Town Supervisor Eni for all of her hard work in putting this amazing event together for us today. And I also would like to thank Deputy Mayor Post for being here as well. Today, we pause to remember September 11th, 2001, a day that forever changed our world. We honor the nearly 3,000 innocent lives taken far too soon. They were mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, friends, and colleagues, each with dreams and hopes that were stolen from them in an instant. We also pay tribute to the brave first responders who, without hesitation, ran into danger to save others. Their selflessness on that day was a beacon of hope amidst the darkness. Many of these heroes have since paid the ultimate price, succumbing to illnesses caused by their exposure during rescue and recovery efforts. Their courage, their sacrifice, and their legacy will never be forgotten, especially John Viteri, Dennis Tortorella, and Brian Payne, who we honor here today. Let us continue to carry forward their memory, not only in our thoughts, but in how we live, showing kindness, resilience, and unity. May we honor them by never forgetting their stories and their bravery. Thank you.
Mayor Sharon Torres of the Village of Mamaroneck is unable to be here today. Next, we have the Honorable Shelley Mayer, our New York State Senator.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here again, and it's an honor to have the opportunity to recall and celebrate and acknowledge the incredible sacrifices of those who gave everything on 9/11. All of us who are old enough to remember that day, each day that we have it again, walks through the entire day again in our mind, where we were, what happened, our tears, our sadness, our shock, and our resolve. I want to particularly acknowledge all those first responders who stood really in an incredible place. They literally ran not only up the buildings, they ran down the West Side Highway. So many people from Westchester who went all the way and made the ultimate sacrifice. But I have to say, and if you read the op-ed this morning of the president of the New York City PBA, he is concerned the memories are fading. It is of those of our generation who remember that day that are keeping this alive. And so I'm so thankful that here you have the next generation present, because that is our obligation, for them to remember this day, to acknowledge this day, and to have it be part of their lives. And so this year I am going to push for, in addition to there being a mandatory moment of silence, that there be age-appropriate education in every public school about this day and what it means. We cannot afford to only have the people who were there that day, who remember that day, to honor the memory of those who gave all. It is our obligation that the next generation takes this day and makes it part of American history. And that is our job as elected officials, to fight for that. And I'm going to lead the fight for that, because I want to see more Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and young people at these events as we continue. Thank you to the town, the villages, for making sure we not only memorialize those who passed away that day, but those who have died since from 9/11 related illness, which has struck so many of our friends and neighbors. Thank you for the opportunity to have this solemn day and to share it in grateful thanks to the extraordinary men and women who sacrificed, who died, and who did everything. And then we turned that into our feelings of unity, patriotism, and our feeling that our America was worth fighting for. Thank you again.
Next, I'd like to call State Assemblyman Steve Otis.
We gather today to remember the great members of this community taken from us on September 11th, 2001. The loss we experienced 23 years ago remains fresh to each of us because of the abrupt, unjust, and immoral way we lost the lives taken from us that day. One of our responsibilities as we come together is to think about the loved ones we lost in the way they lived, to defy the evil of that day and honor them for what they meant to each of us. We reflect upon how they remain part of us and how their love for life, family, and friends affects how we live our lives today. They touched everyone they knew and continue to be in our thoughts and hearts throughout the year. On this anniversary, we summon those thoughts together. The magnitude of our loss on September 11th cannot be measured. We came together and shared the loss then and continue to honor and celebrate those lives today. We also honor every individual who died on September 11th, the first responders, all the victims of that devastating day, and those that have died since from 9/11 related illnesses. We honor them and their families. And I know we're going to be honoring Dennis and John and Brian later today as first responders for their great sacrifice. I want to make special note in relation to Brian Payne that in beyond the fire department community, he has many loved friends in the hockey community in Mamaroneck, Larchmont, Rye, and beyond. And for the hockey community, Brian is in our thoughts today as well. In our hearts, we believe that humanity must overcome evil. One way we can overcome the immorality of that day is to continue to dearly remember the individuals we lost, bring back our memories of their laughter, intelligence, friendship, and love, and have their spirits live on in our hearts forever. Thank you.
Now I'd like to call County Executive George Latimer.
We are here in our governmental context to speak our respective responsibilities, but having been here on September 12th, 2001, when we had the first of these tri-community responses the day after 9/11. Those of you who were there, I know Michael Rosati was here, Joe Russo was here, and others. This is a continuing personal reality for people that we knew, that those of us knew. On that list is John McErlane, and I remember seeing him at the LT one night when I stopped in and there was a sports game on. He was at the bar, and I had no idea that his name would be on a list like this someday. So, hi, John, how are you? Hey, George, how are you? I remember talking to Brian Payne, who lived on the corner of Fern and Valley, when Valley Road had a block party. And I parked in front of his house, and he was out doing something before going to the block party. We chatted for a few minutes, and his brother Rich is a councilman in White Plains and a good friend. I remember talking to John Viteri in the third floor of the Larchmont Village Hall, where the firefighters would be upstairs, and we'd have a meeting in a conference room, and they'd be watching TV on the big screen TV. I remember talking to Dennis Tortorella at the Weaver Street Firehouse. Doug Karpeloff is on that list. I remember talking with him at the Mamaroneck train station. He lived not far from where Ray Maldonado lives, in the Village of Mamaroneck. And if I went up the line, Tommy Palazzo from Harrison, Sean O'Neill from Rye. These were real human beings to me, and to you. These were people we knew as brothers and friends. Helen Crossan Kittle. I remember talking with her right around Fountain Square when I was campaigning one of the innumerable times that I've run for office. And I realized that none of us know what the future holds. And when I saw those people and I talked to them, we talked in here and now with the expectation that we had 1,000 here and nows in the future, and we would see each other again. And now for 23 years, we've come to this location to remember them, and we enshrine them, and now those who died from 9/11 illnesses, we enshrine them to remember them as names on a plaque. It's hard to accept that a living, breathing person that you knew, and some of you who loved, is now just a name on a plaque that we try to remember. I had a story I'll share briefly as I close. Back in the early 1990s, when I had a corporate career, I used to travel a lot for what I did, and there was a trip that I had to make to Dallas. And I was in Dallas overnight, had a 10 o'clock meeting that morning, and when I got up from my hotel room, I got up early, and I did something a little strange. I got in the car and I drove over to Fort Worth, Texas, which is about 30 miles west of Dallas. And I went to what was then the Hilton. I don't know what it is now. I haven't been back to Dallas in a lot of years. But I went to the Hilton Hotel in downtown Fort Worth, and I had breakfast in their breakfast restaurant, which was like every other hotel breakfast restaurant you've ever been in. If you've been in the Hampton Inns in Harrisburg, it's just like the Hilton in Dallas, in Fort Worth, I should say. And when I finished having the nondescript breakfast, I walked into the ballroom and I walked around a little bit, looked at the empty ballroom. I went outside into a parking lot, looked at a parking lot with some cars in it, got back in my car, drove to Dallas to have my 10 o'clock meeting. Why would I do that? Because the iconic day in our minds that preceded September 11th is November 22nd, which happens to be my birthday. And on my 10th birthday, November 22nd, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. For some of you of a certain age, that is a date in history to you, as Pearl Harbor is to me, and as to some of the young kids here, September 11th is. These dates mean something when you were alive to experience it, as my mom and dad would tell me about what it was like to hear on the radio what happened on December 7th, but I didn't live it. But I lived on my 10th birthday, November 22nd. And later in life, when I understood what happened that day, President Kennedy was on a trip to on a trip to Texas, and he made stops all along Texas. And on that day, his itinerary began staying overnight in the Hotel Texas, which is what the Hilton was called back in 1963. And that morning, he went downstairs into that ballroom where he addressed the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce. And he spoke well and received a Stetson hat. It's all there in one of the books. You could read it, probably on Wikipedia. He went out into the parking lot where there were a couple of thousand people who wanted to see the President of the United States, and he greeted them. And then he got in a car, went to the airport. He flew to Love Field. He landed at Love Field and got into a motorcade. And we know what happened after that motorcade in Dallas. His itinerary that day said breakfast in Fort Worth, motorcade, speech at the Trade Mart, off to Austin, and then spend the night at Lyndon Johnson's ranch. But he only lived long enough to have breakfast in Fort Worth. And when I left Fort Worth to go back to Dallas, I thought about what it would be like to not know if you'd make it back to Dallas to have your 10 o'clock meeting. Well, I had my 10 o'clock meeting. We had the business we had to conduct. I flew back to New York, and I've lived 30 plus years since that moment. But John Kennedy didn't know that Fort Worth breakfast was it. And when John McErlane got on that train to go to the city that day, he had an itinerary. He didn't know that going into the trade towers would be the last thing he would do. Nor did Doug Karpoloff, nor did Helen Crossan Kittle, nor did Sean O'Neill, or Tommy Palazzo, or any of these other people that we knew. They were living their lives as normal individuals. Add to that the first responders who responded to a fire at the Trade Center, and they went in to do their professional job. And they had no idea, as Bruce Springsteen sang in The Rising, that they would go up those stairs to eternity. That's why we're here today. That's why we're here today. Because those people, the first responders and the civilians, had no idea what would happen to them, and eternity happened to them. And we owe them a debt of eternal remembrance here for every day that there ever will be a Girl Scout rock. And we owe that same debt next to the Locust Avenue Firehouse in Rye, and we owe that same debt of gratitude at Connor Park in Yonkers and all the other places that we remember this day. We are all mortal, and on some day, each of us will pass to where they passed. I have already had the gift of years. I've had the good fortune to have a child, see her grow to maturity, graduate, marry, have children of her own. I watched the Rangers win one Stanley Cup. I don't know if I'll get to see them win another one. But those gift of years was denied every name on that list. Every name on that list was not given the gift of years. And that's why we're here today, to tell them that no, they were not given that gift of years. They were given the gift of love, of the people that knew them, lived with them in this home community, and will never forget them.
Now I have a letter that Senator Gillibrand asked me to read here today. She was unable to attend. Dear friends, it is an honor to send greetings to everyone attending the annual Tri-Municipal September 11th commemoration ceremony in the town of Mamaroneck. Although I am not with you in person, I join you in spirit to honor the victims of the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, as well as the brave men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice on that fateful day. Through boundless acts of courage, countless New Yorkers displayed profound character, and we are and will forever be indebted to them. During America's darkest hour, we found a glimmer of hope and an affirmation of this country's compassion, unity, and strength in each of these heroes. Today we remember the family members, friends, and colleagues who are no longer with us and find inspiration in the first responders' heroic efforts in service of our nation. Please know that I am keeping you all in my thoughts and prayers. I send my best wishes for a meaningful day of remembrance and service. Sincerely, Kirsten Gillibrand. Now we will have the reading of the names, and I want to call Paige Martinson from the Girl Scouts to come up. Okay.
Helen Belavoski, J. Howard Bolton Jr., Douglas G. Karpoloff, Maurice P. Kelly, Helen Crossan Kittle, Patricia Helen Kittle, Frank J. Kestner, Edward H. Luckett, John T. McErlane Jr., Christopher T. Orgalettes, John A. Rayo, John F. Swain, Glenn Kerwin.
In addition to remembering those members of our community who died on September 11, 2001, we are here today to dedicate a memorial to those first responders from our community whose selfless actions on September 11, 2001 and the days following led to their illness and ultimate death. Like many of the first responders with us here today, they left the safety of our community and rushed down to the city that day with only one thought: to serve, putting the safety of others ahead of themselves. They ran into the city while everyone else was running away. There are 3 names on the memorial today, and we hope and pray that we don't have to add any more. Those names are Dennis Tortorella, John Viteri, and Brian Payne. Dennis was the epitome of the quiet hero. He was always there when you needed him. When you needed something, all you had to do was turn around, and there was Dennis, ready to lend a hand. And when he spoke, his advice was thoughtful, and so everybody listened. He didn't do it for the glory. He loved to serve, and he loved the Town of Mamaroneck Fire Department. It was part of his heritage. His father, his uncle, his 2 brothers, and his 2 sons all served the TMFD. The department named the annual Chiefs Award for a dedicated and valuable member of the department after Dennis. Knowing Dennis, he would have been really proud of this honor, but honestly, more than a little embarrassed by all the attention. Dennis left behind a wife, 2 sons, 5 grandchildren, and 2 brothers. John, a member of the Larchmont Fire Department, was born on May 4th, International Firefighters Day. so his destiny seemed predetermined. John embraced the brotherhood of the fire department and always went the extra mile, being there when called upon, both on duty and off duty. John attended countless fundraisers, conferences, and charity events, always being there for someone in need and never missing an opportunity to give back. John left behind a wife, 2 children, 3 grandchildren, and 2 brothers. Brian was a moral compass of the Town of Mamaroneck Fire Department. He had very high standards, and he didn't permit anything to compromise the integrity of the Town of Mamaroneck Fire Department. And he was tough. He came to every council meeting with a blue notebook. He had prepared notes for each meeting, what SOPs needed to be changed, where were we on some project, or that there was some discipline issue that he couldn't abide. But Brian also had a huge heart. And when one of the young members came to council right after COVID to say that the newer members felt disconnected from the department, he was the first one to say, what can we do to help? And he suggested a mentoring program, which was later enacted. Brian never lost his passion for the TMFD, and at his last meeting, just a month before he died, he still had that blue book and he was calling us all to task. Brian left behind a wife, 4 children, and 6 siblings. Many of the family members of these 3 gentlemen are here today. Now I would like to call Liz Tortorella, Patty Viteri, and Sue Payne to come up to unveil the monument. The unveiling will be followed by taps, so please rise after the monument's unveiled. Now we're going to have the placing of the wreaths. First, I'll call the Town of Mamaroneck. Now we have the Village of Larchmont. Now we have the Village of Mamaroneck. Thank you. Now we have the Girl Scouts. Thank you all for donating these beautiful wreaths. Now I would like to call on the Girl Scouts, who are going to lead us in singing God Bless America.
God bless
George Bernard Shaw once wrote, "The worst sin toward our fellow creatures is not to hate them, but to be indifferent to them. That is the essence of inhumanity." Holy One of all being, let us learn the lesson of 9/11, the ultimate act of hateful indifference. Help us to honor the memory of those precious lives taken by hate through sharing the gifts of our concern, our care, our love. Open us to see beyond the surface, to be curious about ways not our own, to celebrate the dignity of difference. And when we think we have all the answers, teach us to ask a question that we might learn to listen. Sacred spark in every living soul, inspire in us the humility of heart that links us in common cause, recognizing that if we are ever to make this world a place of freedom and justice, peace and higher purpose, we must build not walls but bridges, understanding as we reach out, connecting through our care. Blessed One of betweenness, you are there. So may it be every day. Amen.
I want to thank you all for joining in our community commemoration. I want to thank all of you who participated today, which made this event so special, particularly the scouts, the vets, member of the fire, police, ambulance corps, and the clergy. Thanks to my assistant, Sue Odierna, who coordinated and organized this event, and it wouldn't happen every year without her. I want to give a special, Sue deserves it. I want to give special thanks to the Town of Mamaroneck Highway and Parks Department, led by John Barretto and his staff, notably Mike Mendez and Chris Gonch. They work so hard all the time to keep this park beautiful, and all of our parks for that matter. This new memorial was truly a labor of love, and they embraced it, giving it extra TLC in every detail. And to all the first responders, police, fire, and ambulance, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and you know you have my heart, for your bravery and commitment to protecting us on that day and every day. My hope is that when we leave here today, we feel comforted by and pride in this incredible community. Thank you and stay safe.